Congratulations on hitting the end of this chapter. This chapter was all about classes, and we have seen that classes are a mechanism we have in C++ to build our own types and use them like we use fundamental types like int, double, or whatever. We have seen that classes are really blueprints of objects, and we can go through classes to create objects as we need to use them in our C++ program. We started out by looking at the syntax for creating a class, and we saw that we use the keyword class, we say the class name, we put a pair of curly braces, and we put a semicolon at the end, and inside we can have public and private sections in which we do our things. Public things are going to be visible from the outside. Private things are not going to be visible from the outside. They are only going to be usable from the inside of the class. We have learned about class constructors. We have seen that they are a mechanism we have to control how our class objects are built. Here we have a few examples of constructors we have looked at. We have looked at default empty constructors. We have looked at constructors that take parameters. We have seen all kinds of crazy things. Next, we looked at getters, and these happen to be the functions that help us expose the things we have in our class through a safe mechanism. For example, if we don't want our private variables to be directly visible from the outside, we can go through getters and setters and manipulate them. We saw that it is possible to split our class across multiple files, and we use this information to learn about how other IDEs provide facilities to create classes better than we have in Visual Studio Code. After that, we looked at how we could manage our class object through pointers, and from that we learned about the pointer access notation, which is going to make it easy to manipulate things in our classes from pointers. We can use this to access methods or member variables of our class objects, and this is really cool. We moved on and looked at destructors, and these are special functions in your class that are called to destroy your object. And this is going to come in handy when you have dynamically allocated memory in your classes. You're going to release that memory in the destructor. After that, we learned about the this pointer. And this is a special pointer that is going to be pointing to the current object that your C++ program is working on. We saw that we could go through this, for example, to print the address of an object in memory. We could go through this and pass parameters to the functions that are named the same way as member variables. We could go through the this pointer to set up chained calls for our functions. We could do all kinds of crazy things. After that, we learned about struct. We saw that they are very similar to the class keyword, the only difference being that with struct, members are going to be public by default, and with the class keyword, members are going to be private by default. We closed the chapter by looking at how we could compute the size of an object, and we saw that the compiler is going to use the sizes of your member variables to compute the size of your object. The functions you have in your classes are not going to be factored in computing the size of your class objects. And we saw that you really have to be careful if you have pointer member variables, because the pointer itself is going to be accounted for, but what is pointed to is not going to be accounted for in the size of your objects. And we saw this is really dangerous if you're not careful with stdstring. This is really all I had to share in this chapter. I hope you found it interesting. We are going to stop here in this one. In the next one, we're going to explore a little more about class objects. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.